outside of New Orleans. Wendell Bruni is a great trumpeter from a great musical family in New Orleans, traveled the world playing not just traditional New Orleans jazz, but modern contemporary music as well. Harold Batiste, educator, saxophonist, composer, New Orleans jazz musician who's really pushed the boundaries of what New Orleans traditional music might be, and also worked a lot on rhythm and blues music. And one of his students, Jesse McBride, who's now on the faculty here at Tulane as our jazz pianist, and who studied with Harold over at University of New Orleans, where they've got a great jazz program as well. And I'll mention this at the end, but I just stick in your craw. Harold has written this great autobiography with Aaron Celestin, just about the most interesting, but also about the most beautiful book you'll ever see, filled with gorgeous photographs from throughout his long career, published by Historic New Orleans Collection a couple of years ago. So one more time, Wendell Bruni, Harold Batiste, and Jesse McBride. Turning the floor over to you all if you just want to introduce yourselves and talk about your experiences as musicians here and abroad.
I think you got me first.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
First? Alpha and Omega.
Cat outside just now was talking, or was that saying they treat you like you a bum or something?
You're a Secret Service, right?
Jazz royalty.
Well, with that on
Well, Harold, tell us about 1950s in New Orleans when you were getting your start as a musician and your experiences at teaching at Booker T and becoming a jazz musician around town.
Well, it was 19, wow. Yeah, wow. Long time. Ooh. But anyway, that's what happened. And excuse me, but I never thought I'd live this long. It's a serious thing to me because I never expected to live this long. There was nobody in my family that ever lived to be this old. So I just never expected to be. My mother and father died in my 50s. So I just figured I'd really come about 65 or 70, so that'd be it. And then on top of that, I've been in an environment here that I've been watching musicians die. Young, die much younger than me. What else is there going? All that kind of kid always gone, people hear me. Everybody's coming. Now, my partner, when I first started record label, Melvin last year, he's gone. He's been gone. So I never expected to still be here after all the cats were leaving, getting out of here. But here I am, still here. And here you all are. That's what's important to me, is that you all here, that are people beginning to really be interested in jazz. Seriously. And that's when Jesse inspired me to be that thoughtful, is that I always thought of jazz as America's real music. When I finished from Dillon University, I knew the middle names of more European composers than I knew. Like I didn't know Duke had a first name. I didn't know Conant first name. But I knew Wolfgang Amadeus, and I knew Peter Ilyich, Tchaikovsky, you know what I mean? So I figured that this ain't right. I need to know this. And I heard Mr. Stravinsky was one of my idols. And I met him. I met him in Los Angeles. I was at Capitol Records and Cat City. You know, Stravinsky's upstairs. Do you want to see him? He had this other guy. What's that other guy? Who's his buddy?
The conductor.
Conductor.
Tulane?
Hmm?
Doctor?
He was a guy who was like,
Who's our right-hand man?
yeah, right-hand man. He get the guys together.
Stravinsky's,
Yeah.
Robert Kraft.
Yeah,
Correct.
right.
That's who it was. But he was there, and he was out in the studio with the musicians then, trying to get them organized. And he went upstairs in Capitol Records, and got Stravinsky to come bring him down there. And to my surprise, Stravinsky was more excited about me than I was about him. He was from New Orleans, just because I was from New Orleans. And I had already experienced something like that when I was over in Europe. How every almost every city I went to, were you from New Orleans? Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. But we didn't talk about New Orleans. And I realized then that New Orleans might be more important than I thought it was. And look, us in New Orleans, we didn't think so. We never did. But that was in the, that was later, this was, I already started it. But when I was around the 50s, that's when I started teaching school. In DeRidder. Anybody know where DeRidder is? All right, we got one. Hey, yeah, that's right, all right. Yeah. But that was my first teaching experience. It was a difficult way to start a career trying to be a teacher, because I didn't realize that so much ignorance was still going on. And I didn't realize how bad it was until one day after I had been there about a year. The principal at my school, Beauregard Parish Training School, brought me down to the school board because he was going to talk to the people to try to get us uniforms for the band I was starting. And the way they spoke to him, he went in there, I could have cried. Because they spoke to him like they used to talk to slaves. And they talked to him like that. And sort of chided him because he came down here and said, y'all always want something. Every time y'all see something that's up here, y'all come up here wanting that money, wanting us to get this for you. And I just talking principle like that. And on our way back to our neighborhood, he tried to tell me like they all talk bad, like but they need that. I said, well, it frightens me to hear the authorities talk to a man like you, who's my principal. In such a way in front of me. Anyway, but that was a note to me that I was going to have problems there. But it got better. It got better because I was becoming somewhat of a militant, if you want to call it that. I mean, I wasn't going to stand there and take that. So I went back to school and I got some people in the neighborhood to make some uniforms for the girls who wanted to be married. And we did a parade right in the neighborhood. See, we're gonna have a band. And I got in touch with a music store in, what's that city right in Texas?
Beaumont?
Beaumont, Texas. Yeah, got a music store over there. And they said, yeah, we come over here and do a thing at the school, you know. So they came and they brought a truck with instruments and spread them all over the auditorium at the school. And all the people from the neighborhood came. And that was a turning point, because then all the kids that you wanted to play instruments, they had enough little clarinets and trumpets and stuff like that. So from that point, we were able to make a band. And by the end of that semester, I had those kids playing it so we could play for the commencement before that summer. So, and that really made me feel like, it made me feel grown, because I was only 20 years old then. And I didn't feel grown among all the other teachers. But I felt that I belong here. And they need me here to give those children, some kind of confidence. So that's what DeRidder was like. DeRidder was a wonderful city. And the community taught me gave me another life. It wasn't like New Orleans, DeRidder. And that was the first time I ever had, what's that whiskey they make? They make
Moonshine? Moonshine, yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, oh, the dry comic, yeah. You had much more sense than Al.
Yeah, man, I had enough of that too. I was shot. Yeah, I was shot, boy. But, and the teacher does, you drink this because you can't smell it. Nothing worry about that. You go to meetings. Get a shot. But I grew up real quick there. That summer when I went down to the river and started teaching. But it taught me a lot of things, particularly when I dealt with the store that brought instruments for us, and then got my principal and a lot of the parents in the neighborhood to see what it could be, The next day was to get the uniform, And so I had to go through all of those things like that. But it was an enjoyable launch to my career as a teacher. Because I started off with a lot of things to overcome. And so after about 2 years, I could handle it no more. My mother was at Tulane, and my mother, I didn't know this. My mother had been a school teacher, but she came along. She graduated from New Orleans University, which was New Orleans University. I don't know where you all are from, but before, there was a time in our past where you couldn't be a teacher and be married. So my mother had to give up the teaching at that time to marry my daughter. And so my mother always wanted me to come back home and be a teacher, so she was constantly a job around here. And finally I got into it that I could talk to the people in New Orleans things. got me a job as an itinerant music teacher in public schools. And there was one of the people on the school board who was I don't know what you call them, you know. They would go around and inspect all of the schools and see that you're doing this and doing that.
Like a music supervisor.
More, you know, he would be,
What was his name?
I should hate to mention his name.
Don't mention. For posterity.
His name was Renee Gore. Anybody know that? Ever heard it? No. But and what he did, what happened was one day I was teaching up at a school on Coliseum, just about the Britannia. And he came in and when I was teaching them some songs that they just wanted to play, they wanted to teach. And he stood out in the hall for, about half an hour. I didn't know he was even up there until he finally made his mind up, called me out in the hall. And he told me that he was telling me something that would help him. He said, look, you spend a little bit too much time showing him how to play music, play a song. You just got to teach him some songs and everything. Don't worry about reading that music and everything like that. I said, wait a minute, you telling me not to teach him how to read? He couldn't read that. He was telling me to teach him. Don't teach him how to read. And I said, at that time, the school was still segregated. And there was a school right over here, not too far from the school. What was that school?
Forche or Forche?
Yeah, one of those schools like that.
Yeah, off of,
Right off of Ferret. And I asked him, I said, see, look, are you telling me to get over that Forche not to learn how to read? He said, well, that's not, you're purely provocative, you can't do that. I said, well, you can tell me not to teach these kids how to read. And I really got sort of upset and I got sort of militant with him. And I had been listening to, y'all might have never heard of this, might not never want to hear it, but I had been listening to a cat named Jimmy X. Over at the Dewdrop Inn. Anybody ever heard of the Dewdrop Inn?
We learned about it today.
Really? Yeah, well, he was staying over there, and he used to be talking every day about. He was Muslim, and he was under Elijah Muhammad, and he would talk to us about, about our condition here. And one of the things that he laid out to us was that we don't have anything that we own. All these other ethnic groups got something that they own, and that they can make a live off, and they own their things, they own their own career. So, yeah, I said, what do you want here? And I asked myself, what do you have? Jobs, jobs. So we didn't own anything. I said, but we don't own music. I said, we create enough music that we ought to own some of that. Because they didn't have not one black-owned music company down here. We had a few record labels and so forth. But all those hit stuff that came out of here, like the Cato and all of them, all them cats owned by white people. And that's when I realized that was the dynamic, then that's what happened with the birth to my effort to try to start a black-owned company down here so because I really thought that we created the music so that we should not be poor and be working at hotels and doing all that stuff like shining shoes and anything. So we ought to be just owning some music. And that's what sort of gave start to Air4 Records. It gave me the idea that you need to try to start a record label. Now, the worst thing is funny. It got to be funny because once I got about 5 cats, I just decided that we're going to start a record. And yeah,
Is that when you went down to the city?
yeah, I went to the
What did
city.
they tell you? That was fine.
They thought, they just couldn't believe that I was talking about owning a record company. They thought I wanted this record store. I said, no, we're a record store, we're not still a record company. But we got over that, and we found out that we had no black lawyers that knew that business. So we had to find a lawyer, if we could find one that knew this business. But they had other lawyers, and the lawyers that they had kept the music, kept the ownership of music among white people. So I went down to a guy named Richard August. I'm not sure that I ever heard of him. But he had a law firm, black law firm. And I went to him and asked, was there some lawyer that he could spare and he could come over to our needs and he could learn about record label, because we had no lawyers that don't understand the record business. His name was Ferry Warren. And so Israel Augustine let him come to work with us because he was the best artist we had. That's why I guess he let him do it. Because he was bad. But at least he was a lawyer. We got all, and come to find out, the people down there said, oh, they didn't know nothing. You know nothing about the record business, you know what to do. They didn't know. That's why they all thought I was in the record store. Anyway, but that from that point, that started that stuff that led to this guy there. Ultimately.
No, it's like 40 more years and stuff. and Mr. Bruni can fill a lot of that space because he was coming up in the bands from a family lineage, and also has been a great inspiration and teacher to some of the cats that are playing now. The top ones right now, matter of fact, are our artist in resident, Nicholas Payton, and one of his best boys, Mark Bro, who is Mr. Bruni's nephew, used to follow those cats around in the 80s just religiously, and Clyde Kerr and Alvin and everybody. Anyway, let me let Mr. Bruni do what he did.
Yeah, one of the great things about growing up in New Orleans has been the great influences that have been here. I mean, all the way back to Buddy Bolton, King Oliver, and then the greatest, Louis Armstrong. I mean, he taught the world. Whether you think he does or not, he affects you in some kind of way. Whether you think he does or not. And especially in the era I grew up, I was born in 1954. So that makes me 33. Anyway,
Welcome back.
But it was a great thing to grow up. My dad graduated from high school when he was 15 years old. They had skipped him 2 grades, and he went to Juilliard Conservatory in New York. Was out of there by the time he was 19, and came back to New Orleans. And at that time, there was a big band, the Dookie Chase Big Band. You remember this? And some of the greatest musicians in New Orleans was in that band. They were just kids, but my dad could really write charts. He had written for Eckstein and Cap Calloway and Jay McShane and people like that, and started getting those guys, just like he was saying about teaching people to read. Got those guys reading those charts. He could write stuff they couldn't play, of course, but he could write stuff that they could play, and that was the most important thing. And like Fats Emery, Teddy Riley, Warren Bell, Pernell Fournier was the drummer in that band. Benny Powell played trombone, and I mean, Edward Santina, you know, and I mean, there was some of the real guys that had potential were under my dad's tutelage at that time. And man, those guys became some killer musicians, really great musicians. So, I mean, I grew up with a standard that I was held to scholastically as well as musically. I'm not saying I fared well either way. But anyway, one thing I was raised with was the respect for the forefathers. I had to respect these people. My dad used to bring me to the Union, and there'd be people like Meyer Kennedy and Louis Cottrell and people like that, you know, great musicians. I knew their names. I didn't really know their work since I was a kid, but later on I found out, man, these guys are really great guys. And you know, one thing, that's one of the great things about New Orleans is learning to echo the voice of your forefather. We all know this song, Just a Closer Walk with Thee. We all know this song. But in about 50, what year that I Know came out? 57? 53? This young man right here wrote one of the greatest solos on that form that everyone should learn, because it's got that kind of impact and it's that powerful. Won't we play that, Jesse?
I know.
I know. Closer Walk with You. And I'm just going to play. I'm not going to do a whole lot of stuff, but I'm just going to play what Harold wrote a solo from Melvin Lasty. We were talking about earlier with him. Man, don't struggle with that thing, man. Just play it. Come on, boy. But I'm just gonna play because this is the kind of solo that can make or break a student. Get them interested in something that's playable. It's not all complex, but it makes a statement and an impact. Like, hey, I just said that. You know, even though I repeated the, you know.
When
Yeah.
you memorize it, it's what he wrote.
I memorized the solo he wrote. It was on a song called I Know. And Melvin Lasty played this solo. And Melvin Lasty was like one of the hippest guys you'd ever want to meet, man. And Melvin would just stand, you know, he'd stand kind of side, maybe he'd over there, you know, he'd stand like that. And he just was just the hippest guy you ever want to meet. But anyway, you ready, young man?
I'm gonna do the best I can.
All right. So anyway, without warm up, without none of that stuff, we're gonna do this song. It's just the solo he wrote on the song called I Know. 1, 2, 3. I got it into it. Bop, 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 bop. 1.
Exactly.
Okay. And it's just that simple right there. got a trumpet playing student with the YouTube and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can get anything almost, you know. They can get a lot of stuff they shouldn't have, of course. But that's one of the things they should get, that they should have. It's just and it's not anything complicated, but it spells out those gospel changes there. And a thing like that can change a student's life. And it's like when I first heard that, because my dad was a trumpet player, my brother John was a great trumpet player, and I used to just take the mouthpiece. And when I was a little kid, and I thought I was Melvin Lazarus. You know, I was doing all that kind of stuff, trying to be like my daddy and my brother, David Ptolemy, people like that, before I even know the, you know. And then I started writing the valve of the note down. This is before I knew how to read. I was about 7 or something like that. But I had that burning desire. My dad sent me to business school. He thought I'd get a real job when he came. Bad chance of that. But anyway, it's small things like that, like growing up in New Orleans and learning the importance of things like that, that can really change the life of a young musician. A lot of times today, I hate to say this, we don't hold people responsible for things like that anymore. You know, because everything is based on hip and personality and a whole lot of things that got nothing to do with music. But, for real, my dad was a very strict guy. He knew it well. And he was very knowledgeable. And when he said, "Hey, Pumpkin," I knew I was in for something. Because it was like he was going to make a suggestion or a correction. But it was a blessing and really wonderful thing to grow up in New Orleans and to be respectful of what came out of New Orleans. And, you know, like when I came up, when I was a little boy, my brother John was studying a lot of Dizzy Gillespie stuff. And when Dizzy Gillespie had this spitball incident, you know, with the Cab Calloway band, my dad kind of replaced him when that happened. And Diz always said, "Man, I wouldn't want to be famous, man. Think it took that job, man." You know, anyway, who knows what's in your future, you know, no. But it was a really great thing to grow up in this little city. And New Orleans, operating at 65%, is about 100% better than almost anywhere else. Really mean that. Yeah.
Would you mind if I just interjected to suggest that those musicians that you're talking about that Harold assembled for AFO and your dad,
Yeah.
I think are names that probably a lot of folks don't understand and don't realize that there was a whole modern jazz community here
Of course.
that ran against the grain of you know, what these musicians played at night and for their own pleasure wasn't necessarily what people were willing to pay for when they came to New Orleans or thought of as New Orleans music. Does that sound accurate? Or to either, to anybody up there?
Well, I guess you think in terms of the overall United States, the people here who like that music, who love it, acted out, but they didn't rise to the level where they had an auditorium down there for this kind of music. This had to happen on the streets. This had to happen on the streets and at the barrooms and at the whorehouses, and even at church in that place. But it did not have the respect that European music had, you know, as being serious music. It was serious, but it was joyful. And what I see, even in nowadays, what has happened is that America is wanting to be more joyful, and they do a lot of bad things in order to free themselves from their society. And that's why they like our music, and it's obvious that they like it because they buy it. And you make, stars out of many of them. And it's unfortunate that they make stars because it kills a lot of them. It makes them start going after the money things and all those things rather than you hear the music and see what it does for your soul. So,
That's a great observation. That's great. Like you were saying about the transition that was taking place, I mean, my dad was kind of part of that because he was one of the guys that actually went to the conservatory, got that kind of knowledge, and was able to transfer that European classical knowledge to a jazz idiom. And he could write things, so he could, like, he was telling me years ago about he wrote this, he called it a showstopper. And he was not a real bragging man, but when he said it was a showstopper, I believed him. Because he wrote an arrangement on Rhapsody in Blue. Man, and I mean, the way he could hear, because my dad could be in the kitchen, cooking. He loved to cook also. And I'm in the den right next to the kitchen, trying to play the piano and hitting a chord. Wait. You see that middle finger? Move that down one note, He could hear like this, I mean, he could think like, like, he tells you what note that is. That's the kind of, and to grow up under that kind of stuff was a little frightening, but but when an artist has something to say, he's willing to pay the dues to be able to say that. So, I mean, like Marcellus Mansion, like, I don't know how much money they made over there, I don't think much, but they were some of the greatest musicians, in the modern transition of New Orleans, the great Nat Perrielot. I mean, he was, as a matter of fact, they told me a story about Coltrane came here, and he'd heard about Nat. He went to I think it was the Haven or somewhere like that, and he just caught a taxi. Coltrane caught a taxi. If Coltrane ever shows up at your gig, it's a compliment. Take my word. But he went there and he listened to Nat, and he was like, "Yeah, he can play." And people like Nat Perrielot, that was Marcellus, James Black, Peter Chuck Beatty, Marshall Smith, Richard Payne,
Blackwell.
Melvin Lasted, Blackwell, and all these guys would go there and play and maybe go home with, you think, $1.50? It was just, but it was an opportunity to play. And, to have the chance to express yourself artistically like that. I mean, some of the funniest gigs you ever played were in somebody's living room somewhere. And that was the lucid, you weren't playing for money. You were playing for love. And, I mean, we've all had these gigs, and not all of us, but some of us had gigs at Carnegie Hall and all this kind of stuff where everyone's printed proper and, got their mink stoves on and stuff like that. That's not comfortable to play that. You do your best, but I go to your living room, and we all got sandals and shorts and just sitting up. That's going to be your best music there when you play for love, and that's what a lot of these guys did. Like there was a great trumpet player around here. It was under my dad. His name was Tony Morat. Remember Tony? Man, Tony was great lead trumpet player and solo. And I mean, he moved to California, worked at the post office, never played. I mean, LA didn't present that kind of opportunity for people like that. Had he stayed in New Orleans, man, he might have been playing, but, he got married, and, the wife was like, ooh. Don't ask me how I know. But that could happen, and he told him all that, just stopped playing. Charlie Gaspard was another one. Just keep playing. Curtis Trevine, people like that. I'm talking about great players. Just, I don't know. I don't know if they didn't love it enough or they had other priorities, whatever it is. I mean, but lots of musicians, like I say, at the Marcellus Mansion, and you know, blacks couldn't play at the municipal auditorium in those days, so they went to Booker T. Washington High School. Is that right? And gave concerts. And on your label, not so long ago, about maybe 3 years ago, they put out a Boogie Blackwell with Nat Parallot, Alvin Baptiste, Ellis. Man, and who's on bass on that? DeVerney. Yeah, Otis DeVerney is on bass. Man, it's like a concert everybody should have heard. I don't know how many people were in the audience. Judging by what you hear on the thing, you know, maybe it was 70 people there or something like that. But this is
I'm so
God.
glad that we got
That you
to
got
do
that.
that.
Yes.
And that's what it turned out to be, that the AFO Records turned out to be a place to put our history on record.
Yeah, document our history, right?
Document it so that it would be, you know, when I read that a lot of Boston music never would have been found if there had been a memory since when wealthy people who found his music, all that church music and all that stuff. And I thought, man, it was almost 200-300 years after that his music was discovered. And that's partly what inspired me to make sure we try to leave some evidence that we were here and that we passed through, because the history just gets thrown out.
Yeah, Bach had scores, but the recordings are crucial for that kind of music.
Yeah. You know, for about 5 semesters I taught at the University of New Orleans, and Ellis just came to me and said, hey man, just, you know, come give these guys some idea what it would take to make a gig, you know. So I patterned my little class. It was just an adjunct position. I had 2 days a week, Tuesday and Thursday class. And what I did, I had about 40 forms of the blues. Because if you're going to play jazz, you've got to play the blues. I'm looking at the name of his book, Unfinished Blues. The blues ain't gonna never stop. And the day it does, we're in trouble. I tell you. So I had about 40 forms of the blues. And all these kids who want to learn all these, you know, Locrian scales and stuff like that, great, that's great. You're going to learn the blues in here. That's what we learned it in here. Next thing, everybody's going to bring 25 2-5-1 licks. Right or wrong. Just put something down there so I know you know what a 2-5-1 lick is. Third thing everybody had to learn, to play the bass drum. You're going to learn the bass drum in here. Oh, Mr. Brody, they're too hip for this. You know what I mean? No, you're not too hip for it. Because, you know, you can just do it. Yeah, they're too hip, you know. So I said, we're going to learn the bass drum. Another thing we had to learn is 4 sharp, 4 diminished, 1 6 2 5. Like that's very, very important in the development of jazz. You know, these guys would stand, they had the whole part of the anatomy, and you know what I'm saying? They all hip and stuff like that. What's going to happen when you come to that, son? You know, because it's just, you know, you're planning to fail. That's exactly what you're doing, you know. And, but a lot of the guys that really did that work, Nicholas Payton, Mark Bro, Bryce Winston, some of the baddest cats around, Dwight Fitch, he was in it, Jonathan Lefkowski, all those guys, you know, they learned from them. Bill Terry, all those guys developed. Who's that?
He's playing bass.
Yeah, I know he's playing bass. Yeah. But it was like, these are the things that are necessary to make a gig. You could stand there and be hip and practice, have the practice room on fire if you want. But one day you're going to have to pay a bill. Mom and dad can't do it forever. One day you're going to have to pay the bill. And that's, you know, that's when you got to play music for people. Because my dad used to say this, if they're not, I would just say it like he said, they're not asses on seats out there. They don't need your ass up here, you know? So, I mean, it's just simple as that. Play something, you know, that people can relate to, will understand. Yes, make your statements and do it your way, stuff like that. That's not what I mean. But at some point in time, you've got to play something that's appealing to somebody that causes them to buy your art. And it's just, you know, I know I sound like a businessman now, but I'm sorry. You got to do that. You know?
You sound like a broker.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm broke. Like I was on this gig the other night and said, you know, jazz music is just like Baroque music. Because if you're playing jazz, you're probably Baroque. You know? That's kind of just the way it is. Come on, Jesse, get in some of this.
Oh man, I'm learning.
Go ahead. Tell us what you learned.
That's basically what I do. That's what I've done since '98. I'm actually from Houston, and I moved here in 1998. And you know, it's had a rude awakening about what I did not know and what I needed to know. And it was just ignorance. It wasn't like I was trying to not know nothing. It just happened like that. And people like Harold, people like Mr. Bruni, people like Ellis Marcellus. When I first got here, really just had to start over. But I was mainly a violinist, a violist in high school. I kind of quit that, started messing around on the piano, and for some reason they let me in the University of New Orleans. And the first semester, that was actually on sabbatical. He had some health issues. And I had only known Professor Marcellus. And that was definitely a way, because I was working my butt off, but I worked my way to a D. And if I don't know what I would have done had that not have been there that next semester, because they're kind of like a yin and yang, Professor Marcellus and that, because their approaches are to get to the same goal, but different paths. So you kind of need both of those, and that's why they were a perfect match over there. And I caught the tail end of that. It was about 3 years into it. Professor Marcellus retired. That stayed on until post-Katrina, and then he got out. But, you know, I just began to soak it up. After about the first year of college, I didn't really know that I was supposed to go out and be checking out music. I was so inept, you know, fundamentally. I just need to deal with my scales, and like Mr. Bruni said, just deal with some basic progressions. And as I listen to him talk, I still realize how much I don't know. So it's that kind of thing. But you just go through the process. You learn tunes. Back we get a saxophone out and say, hey, you know this tune? And he just start playing. Of course, I didn't know it. I'd mess it up and kind of laugh at me and say, no, that go like this. And then you sit down and get me right. And one tune. And I don't know, 40, 50 tunes later, you might say, hey, you ever heard any of the stuff that I put out? He never introduced me to AFO stuff yet. I was so in need of just fundamental music, just learning what the history of the music, the blues, just learning form, just learning all these very basic fundamental things. And once I got past that, he introduced me to AFO. And I was listening to it. There's a great pianist, Glenn Patchett. And I was like, man, this is killing. Who is this? Herbie Hancock? You remember, that's why he started laughing before I finished it.
Yeah, because Glenn looking like a little kid.
Yeah. So I'm listening to these guys. Like, nah, man, that's Glenn. And I'm just like, man, this dude is ridiculous. And he ain't Herbie Hancock. I got so much to learn. And just began that process. He allowed me to start, reconstitute, I'll say, the Next Generation Band. He had started Next Generation Band around 93, 94, around that time. But that's kind of the second incarnation. The really first incarnation was when he had Winton and Branford around 76, 77. He recorded those guys with Ellis and James Blunt. And to shop them around, trying to get a record to help them. And well, you know, a few years later, as these classical records, jazz records come out, and the rest is history on that. But, you know, that was thinking about making sure that young cats had a place in this business, you know, way back then. And on through the 80s, when he was at UCLA or USC or all the places that he taught in LA, it was the same kind of journey. And I just kind of got into it when I arrived in the late 90s. So I kind of redid the next generation with cats that I was in college with. Dylan Hicks, Samir, Marie, James, Westfall, a few other folks, Rex Gregory. Paulfus was playing bass initially, but David Paulfus is a little older than us, and you know, he was just kind of there to really have position. You got to do it. I said, man, nobody gonna come and listen to no Jesse McBride. You Harold Baptiste. He was like, well, I was not Harold Baptiste at one point. So he's like, you got to start your journey, whatever it's gonna be. Kick me out of the nest. And you know, I just do what, you know, I've been so blessed and fortunate to be a part of. If one for that, and Ellis, Mr. Bronies, Clyde Kerr, Alvin Baptiste, you know, Kid Jordan, Jermaine Basil, Leah Chase, all of these people that are, you know, just taking their time to laugh at me a little bit, help me along. You know, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just young in the game still, and trying to get some footing and perpetuate the history.
What's one of the great things
learn.
is that you're helping students. That's what perpetuates it. You know, I mean, having music is kind of like having a religion. I mean, you can't keep it to yourself. You're gonna, you know, I mean, you don't have to go door to door to trying to preach people into church. I'm not saying that, but if someone's not doing something right, you got to go up and hey, son, that's not cool. Now you get shot. I mean, I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm talking about when I was a kid, you know, but. And, you know,
That's so necessary now, though, Mr. Bruce. That's
Yes.
why I have you guys come here. That's why I've had, you check the Jazz at the Rat artist series that I do here. It started with Harold Baptiste and Clyde Kerr. Because without those two guys in the last 50 years of music in New Orleans, I mean, this music, who knows the direction it would be in, who knows the influences and how the music would have been presented to all of the successive generations. Because those two guys in particular, with Professor Marcellus and, you know, other cats, Basil Hollow, but those two guys in particular, you know, really were instrumental in the foundation of what's called, quote unquote, modern New Orleans music. And not just to say modern jazz, because that's kind of the thing that got, you know, specialized. I hear the older cats talk about, we didn't have no specialty. We played music. If the gig was sweet, you know, music, we played that. If it was a string band, we played that. If it was some hot jazz or whatever they call it, traditional jazz, whatever the label was, all of these guys knew it. Both John Brunies, all of those guys. I mean, you can play a tradition, you can play a second line at 3 o'clock, you can play Preservation Hall at 8 o'clock, and wake up at 6 a.m. and be ready to do a funeral. You know, and that's the chasm in which the music exists. There's so much there. There's so much on the side. There's so much at the bottom. There's so much at the top. You just have to expose yourself. And that's why I always say I'm learning, because I literally am. When I sit here, and I don't have the fortune to talk to Mr. Brunies as much as I'd like to, because he's an incredibly busy man to us with. These opportunities, y'all are learning something, but I'm definitely learning more than you're learning, because I'm hanging on to every word. And then after this, I'm going to be like, hey, man, forgive me on that I know. Why don't you share with me a little bit? Amongst other tunes. Matter of fact, we were doing a session, show you how busy Mr. Brunies was. We were doing a session, I don't know, about 4 months ago. We were doing some Clyde Kerr and James Black music. I labeled the record Black Kerr. And I was talking to another trumpet player, Kevin Lewis, who was on the record. He's like, oh, man, I'm about to go share with Mr. Brunies after this. I was like, man, I know he knows some James Black tunes I don't know. And sure enough, he knew a couple that I'd never even heard of, but he couldn't make the session. And, cause he had 2 gigs that day, or 3 gigs or something crazy.
Bill was the biggest.
I was just like, all right, I gotta do a whole separate session just to, you know, have Mr.
Well, that's
Bruni's
all right.
with tunes
You got
that we
material.
don't know, that we
You got
need to
material.
know and learn, and that need to be documented, because that's exactly what AF4 has done for the last 50 years. It's taken artists that, you know, Capitol Records, Blue Note, or any of these people that aren't paying attention to the greatness that's going on down here, and that's what Bad has done. Out of his own pocket, out of his own time, in between dealing with family and professional other aspects of his career, has documented New Orleans music for the last 50 years. No one was recording Ellis Marsalis. Ellis Marsalis is famous now. Everybody knows it. His own children were like, you know, yeah, you always talk about him that Pearl Hand. And then Ellis brought that record out. Ellis Marsalis Quartet. And they shut up. I said, oh. I was up in New York recently and was letting a really famous young guy, Robert Glasper, listen to that recording. And he's like, oh man, that's Branford's group. Man, what was that, like the 80s? I was like, no, that's Ellis Marsalis in 64. With Nat Pearl and James Black and Believers March.
Yeah.
So at that point, the music, you could see direct line of influences from him thinking that, no, this was Ellis and all Branford and all, and no, this was directly who they were influenced with. And if you talk to Branford at any point, you'll say that's why he, you know, picked up Kenny Kirkland. Because, man, he had such a great touch, reminded him of his father. And Kenny Kirkland from Queens.
Yeah.
Didn't even know about Ellis myself.
Years ago, I used to work on Bourbon Street. I just moved out of my parents' house, just got out of college, had my first slap in the face with rent and bills and stuff like that. And I was playing on Bourbon Street at a place called the, what's the name of this doggone thing?
Next over?
No, on
Yeah.
Yenville and Bourbon.
Oh, okay.
Something, anyway, they used to play that 2 banjo players, a drummer and me. With my Lee Morgan stuff, you know what I mean? So, you know, that was very interesting. And Winton used to come, he'd sit on his case and just listen to me play that. And he's like, how do you hear that stuff through 2 banjos? And I'd say to him, I'm not relying on those banjos. You know, I'm glad I'm not. You know, that stuff. Like, and so, you know, I mean, and it hopefully that helped in some kind of way. Like, hey, don't go, you know, well, I got heard the Hancock on piano, so I'm gonna play this way tonight. That doesn't mean that. Usually, you gotta leave home with it, and you know, like another one of my dad's things is practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. You know, practice the things you don't know. Play the things you know. When you get on the gig, you got a pocket full of stuff you know. Don't go there with the stuff you don't know. Because, you know, you're not going to sound too good. It's good to experiment with things and try and force a little bit here, there, yes, of course. But, you know, it was just like, I had those 2 banjo players and a drummer. And I still played. I still had to play what I had to play, you know. And, or what I knew at that time. And like I said, Winton used to come and he'd sit on his horn case and just listen.
It made me think about
Man, yeah, how do you play like that with these guys, you know? I just said, man, I'm not counting on that.
That's playing as me.
Yeah.
Bob Ogden.
That man, we.
Family.
Yeah.
That was I was playing on Bourbon Street.
Really?
And
Bob
piano,
Ogden,
saxophone, and drums.
she had the band on Good Rockin' Tonight. Is that right?
What?
Bob Ogden's band made Good Rockin' Tonight.
Oh, yeah,
with Roy Brown. So,
Roy Brown?
yeah. So
Oh, right.
you can say Bob Ogden had the first rock and roll band. I mean, there's an argument for that. But they did, oh man. And Bob Ogden was a guy I played with him a lot, you know. And he used to get put in the contract that the band could eat. That had to be in the contract. The band can eat.
You know, pretty right.
Exactly. So whenever we went on a gig and Bob Ogden wasn't there, you know, we'd always say, hey man, is this Bob Ogden? It always meant, can we eat, you know? So that became like, anyway, Bob, New Orleans is full of characters, as they said, for many, many years.
I'm just picking up on these amazing stories. Two things you guys keep referring to the love and the artistry of it, and the need to pass it on, and then the need, like you said, to put food on the table, to pay the rent.
course.
I know you go out on the road all the time. You went back and forth to California a lot. Was that a decision? Was that a financial decision? Was that more than that, or how have you been able to stitch a career together?
Why
It
did I
seems
first
difficult.
go to California? It was because I got fired from the school board. This cat that I told you about earlier, named Renee Loa, when he came up to them six and caught me teaching the kids how to read,
That's all. So come teaching kids how to read. That's bad.
and I said some things to him that day was sort of. I got a letter from the school board. Come down to the school board and explain why I couldn't obey the supervisor, you know. So I went down to there and smiling. But I realized once I got into that meeting that they were determined to have their way.
Mhm.
So at the end of the meeting, I told them, well, y'all can have the job. I'll see y'all later. And that's when I left to go to California. That's when I happened to go out, and Ellis was at in Portland, and Blackwell was there. Needed a way to get back to California.
Wow.
And I said, well, I got a call.
Yeah.
Let's go to California. And that's when I drove up to California. That's the first time I've been out of Louisiana.
Really?
Driving.
My goodness.
Drove all over to California.
Yeah.
Stay in Texas.
Yeah, it took a day to get there all fast.
Did you all drive? You drove out there?
I drove. I had a 19, I forgot what year it was. Now, it was a Chevrolet 210. That was the worst Chevrolet they had, was 210.
But you stayed.
Eventually to become the musical director for Sonny and Cher, this young man. Yeah.
Oh, this book would trip you out.
Yeah.
One thing I remember from the book is that in the same chapter you say, oh, I met Sam Cooke and I produced a session from him, and I met Ornette Coleman. And I think for most of our students here, and for me, we would say, how on earth could one musician hang with those two musicians? How could one person cross those kind of borders?
It makes sense, sort of, but it doesn't really, I mean, there's people that had an idea that they wanted to do something, and they realized that I could do it. So you make no difference between, what do you say?
Oh, Ornette and Sam.
Ornette and Sam Cooke.
Oh, yeah, well,
But that kind of
But you know, you think about the diversity of stuff that came from New Orleans has prepared us for these kinds of tasks. To be able to make a, do a session for a gospel singer, be able to do a session for a rock and roll singer, be able to do a session for a guy who plays out, And look, Ornette Coleman lived in New Orleans. He lived with Melvin and them.
that's how he got the
Yeah,
money.
exactly.
And he didn't just play far out jazz.
No. Yeah, he played.
One of the first things Bat told me was that first thing he did was put his arm together and play all the Charlie Parker transcriptions you could handle.
Yeah,
He could do it.
yeah, he was a
Just-
great player. But
Evolved in that direction.
So this versatility you're talking about that all of the musicians have, and almost I think some of us think of musicians as being really competitive, but you're also kind of describing yourself as a family. And I kind of a family that feels responsible for what the sounds of New
Because I mean, you think about a lot of, I might get in trouble here, but you think about all these modern records, all these kids can go there and play all that stuff. They done studied, they know every scale in the world and stuff like that. They have no personal identity to me. When you heard Melvin Lasting, you knew that was Melvin. When you hear Louis Armstrong, you know it's Louis Armstrong.
That's one of the things that I've thought about music as a voice. You know, like when your friend calls you on the telephone, you don't have to ask who that is. You know who that is. You know their voice.
That's great.
When you know the voice, you know who it is. That same way a cat get up there, you have to ask who that is. I used to hear every cat that came on the radio, I could name because I know their voice. You hear Sonny Rollins, you know that's Sonny Rollins. That's the way it is, and I think of music in that way, and I think of it in that way in many ways. That music, when a person comes and says, "Well, I can't sing," I say, "Yes, you can sing. If you can talk, you can sing. Because talking ain't nothing but singing. You know, if you can make a sound, the birds can sing. They didn't go to bird, they didn't go to Oberlin and they sing.
Let's open it up. Other questions for anybody? I'm sure there's interested people.
Yeah.
Is that signature voice that you want to develop as a musician, is that a decision that you make as you're coming up? At what point do you say, this is my sound, or is it just kind of happen?
But I tell
Did you
you
do
what,
that when you were growing up talking?
I'm gonna give you this.
That's right.
We got
I
you.
was thinking, oh, you always sing.
I'm just saying this like an hour or
That's all
so
right.
ago.
The only bad question is the question you don't ask.
Trying to like, because I'm from the Manhattan area originally.
All right.
So like, but I think like New Orleans just strikes me as just like it's a city, but there's a community there, and then the music community seems like jam circles in a way. It's like, I mean, I was just thinking about this just now, and then like, because like, I think what you were trying to say a second ago was like, you go to New York City and you've got a lot of ego there and a lot of competitive and a lot of formal education behind you. Like I lived in New Brunswick during a time in the 70s when there was a huge jazz collective, and it was that feeling of jam, and somebody's lost.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't see that around. Now I live down by Philly. I don't really see that sharing, like, you know, that feeling. So can you speak to that about the comparison of the uniqueness of New Orleans?
One of the problems in the United States and in the world is that as we evolve further, we lose certain abilities that we had when we were closer to nature. As we get more like so-called human beings, and we think that we're different from other animals, then we begin to lose all the talent that we have as an animal, as a kind of animal we are. Because there's just like New Orleans has all this big stuff, we all got that. And what it does to me, it seems to me that what's happening is when this music begins to, inhabit people, they go for it. They go crazy. They want some of it. Everybody wants some of that. Because that's just the animal in us.
But you know what's another thing is, like in the 70s when you say, jazz was still learned basically in the street and in the band that you were in. You developed something. You developed your sound, your voice, your style, your way of approaching changes, your tone, you will develop that. But now, we learn this from a book. So everyone is, you know, everyone's reading the same book. So what happens? Everybody almost plays the same.
Exactly.
You know? It's Philadelphia, my favorite trumpet player, Lee Morgan. That's my favorite. When you ever hear me play, you're going to hear Lee Morgan coming out of that, baby. But he was influenced by Clifford Brown, Fats Navarro, and Dizzy Gillespie, and everybody before him. But now, yeah, now kids don't need a teacher. They don't get a teacher, they get a publicist now. And I'm not saying that to put it down, it's just very true. Like the guy told me one time, man, this guy's 15, but he's got a brother, 11, younger than him. Okay. I hope you have new brain surgery on you, man. You know, I mean, just because you're 11, that doesn't, I don't know. But anyway, go on.
How do you feel about the scene of education in terms of public schools and music? I know when I was going to RTWL, there's been some talk in the paper just today that they're trying to demolish it in Gertown. And when I was in middle school and I went to RTWL, Paul Baptiste was the band director at our school, and that's where I first learned about the drums. But how do you feel about the music as it's being taught in public schools here in New Orleans?
You want me to take that question?
All right.
There is so much pressure for people to perform now rather than actually learn music. So the teacher don't have time. It's just like Rene Dua was saying. You don't teach him to read, teach him to play, whatever that means. What does that mean? You know, I mean, it's like, it's kind of like the give the man a fish theory. You know, I mean, you know, teach him to read. You got books forever. You got things to learn. Anything you want to know is probably in a book somewhere. You got to develop your own way of doing it, but there is a way. So there's so much pressure on music teachers now to make kids perform, because that's what keeps the parents happy. You know, man, my little kid, the guy came here, man, that we could learn those John Philip Sousa books. We had to read them, you know, and they have, you know, I mean, you go to Washington.
One of those too, right?
Pardon?
Like one of those.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, this taught you to play your instrument.
Yeah.
And taught you to be an innovator yourself. But now, if you're just going by, you know, boom, 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 you know, and you're like, okay, that's ruling the world now. And like Louis Armstrong's been dead since 1971, but he did this song, this called Skokian. He did that in the 60s sometime in Africa. And now that's what most of the brass bands are thriving on right now. That one lick. Boom, 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 boom. Most of the bands are thriving on that. And that's just 1 to 4, 1 to 4, 1 to 4. And that pentatonic scale of the minor third, I don't get too, you know, involved in it. But that goes over that 1 and 4. Now, what we don't have is kids who can play a 5 chord. That's why they had to bring the 25-2-5-1 licks to me. You know? And I'd say, hey man, not only do we have 25-2-5-1 licks, we got 7 people in here. We got 175-2-5-1 licks. You know, but they're still playing that blues scale over the 5 chord, which is totally wrong. People accept it because they keep kids and stuff like that. God bless them. But it doesn't make it right. You know, but teachers don't have they are pressured to make kids perform. So that's what's, you know, I went to college with Paul. Southern University. What you say, Mr. Bat?
Well, I'm just saying that,
Modern education.
yeah, the effective word is modern. Today, the world, how I was at mine this morning, you know, television went out, and they were saying on there, call back later on, and we'll be back on the air. Something like that they were saying. I said, what kind of stuff is this, man? I just want this television. They falling off the air already. But I realized that this year, the television, people in technology, the television, people have got them to a point where they're hustling, trying to see how they can get the most out of every book. They can get out of it. And so the programs that I like, I can't find them because they keep cutting them off and putting them in a different place, and putting them in a different place. And that's supposed to be serving the people, and making them think they're getting more and more television, but they ain't getting no more. They're getting more chopped up television. But that's the way it is now, where we are now. I think that it's hard for us to settle down on anything because we've got so much available to us.
Yeah.
So much technology available to us.
It's in some ways it's a little unfair to try to answer that question because we're from New Orleans, where we were able to hear so many people. You know, someone from Rattlesnake, Indiana, didn't have those conversations. You know, so. But that's why I hold them more responsible. Like, son, you can go here, Nicholas Payton. You can go here, Leroy Jones. You can come here, me, or go here, Mark, or go here, whoever you like. You know, but you're gonna walk up there, you know, like, hey, bro, I come here to blow you out, and I'm like, that's just the way it is now. I mean, if I sat next to Jack Willis or my daddy, or like Albert Walters or somebody like that, man, I had humble pie. You know, a whole big piece of it too, because these guys knew things I didn't know. But you know, we say the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. I knew I didn't know. You know, and I was just like, because you know, I thought I fingers until Papa French called me for this gig, and Badat was on the gig, and he called Cherry, and I was like, Cherry. What is Cherry? I know it now, you know. I made a show that night. I looked in the book and found out what the hell was Cherry. But, you know, and it just goes, you know, goes down in the half step. Cherry, Cherry, you're hard to get at. It's very subtle. Cherry, Cherry, you know the song. But I mean, I was like, Cherry. You know, man. So, I mean, that kind of stuff keeps you in check, if you're real. I mean, we've made stars with people now they're not held responsible, but that is okay. But that's just the way I learned it, you know.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Harold, when you say, I knew Van Gogh, he was a slave driver spring.
Yeah.
When they say you want to teach the kids to read, were you teaching lessons as well as running a band?
Yeah.
So in
We
neither
didn't
kind
have a band.
so it was mainly one-on-one lessons?
Hmm?
Was you teaching lessons, in other words?
Yeah, I was teaching, I teach big classes.
Oh, the class, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
teaching how to read.
So how do you teach them to play without teaching them how to read? You just teach them licks like you were saying, or what?
No, you teach them, you teach them all of the equipment that you need. Yeah, you know the difference between a quarter note and a half note.
Okay, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that's how you learn to read.
Yeah.
It's like ABC.
And Mr. Houston was my first teacher.
Oh, yeah?
Well, first, Kerry Levine. Remember Kerry?
Yeah.
He taught a lot of violin players, and he would come and we just played a C scale and stuff like that. Then Sam Hendrick came, and that was his first teaching assignment at Jones School. And then when I got in junior high school, Mr. Houston, and we had to just learn. The first note we knew was G. That was the Bellman first note, G. All right. And then we went to F, and I didn't know F, man. Like F. know, so I looked at the guy named Kenneth Matthews sitting next to me, and he was pressing the first valve. I was like, you know, I was like, hey, I know something, man, you know. I'm glad he was right. But it's like, so it's very essential to get these kinds of things, like what Mr. Bat is saying, because like, you know, we just got people playing that pentatonic scale now, and they're wearing it out over, I got rhythm over giant step over everything. They just, that's their whole thing, and they're not held responsible for other things, and you know, we're feeling them. They're not feeling us.
You know, I had to teach out in California, the lady thought that her son could play blues.
Yeah.
Because he could play, what's the book had?
Yeah.
Blues, yeah, written down.
There you go.
And he could play that.
Yeah.
Because he could play the blues.
That's why in my class I had them 40 blues. One just was straight 1-4-5 blues, and they got one. But we started 1, then we went to the, you know, 1-7, then the 4 chord back to 1, then G minor, C7 back to F. You know, this kind of way. And once we learned all of those things, how the blues actually functions, that's what made it justifiable to say, hey man, that's why you need your 25-2-5-1 licks. Because when we go into the 4 chord, we want to do, you know, 5 minor 7, 1 7 to 4. That's how we're going to get there. And then, you know, and then on top of that, tritone substitutes, and you know, anyway, there was a whole lot of information we got out of that class. Not everybody paid attention. I mean, you know. Any more questions?
I think that's one of the biggest holes that I see in music education at this point, at this point. Because I guess I've been more in observation of it over the last 10 years. We've had way more time in the game. But the biggest thing I see is that the lack of the state's understanding of how important that music is to culture. Because simply, if you look at children that are exposed to music, I'm not even saying they're master of it. I'm just saying that are exposed to it. Whether you have an orchestra program, a band program, or a jazz band program, anything that has something to do with creative music or arts or anything, those children have a higher probability of success, higher probability of having better grades in middle school and high school, being more open and accepting to new things and different perspectives in life, because they had to be, because this was something totally foreign to them. Music, as you hear it, is something that you know, just love, or, you know, you gravitate toward. But once you start to, you know, learn the ins and outs of it, like math or physics or history or anything else, you know, you get to the details. And then that, you know, stimulates your mind. And then if your mind is stimulated in a creative way like that, then it just begins to expand. But if you don't have that stimulation, if you don't have that initial push, or say, hey, we have a band here, who's interested? There's always like 10 people that want to play drums. 10 people want to play trumpet. And none of the boys want to play flute. And, you know, it's just all those things that you see if you ever put a band together, or if you ever put, you know, any kind of musical anything together. So there's a lack of support, mainly from our governor, Bobby Jindal, who's cutting programs at this very moment. And when you have something that's a top, a governor of a state who doesn't understand culturally, I don't know where he's from, but who doesn't understand culturally what it means to have music connected to Southern Louisiana history, I think that you lose the importance of what that connection is. And, you know, and like Mr. Bruni said, it's going into all these details musically, and I'm just like, oh yeah. But a lot of young people are unexposed to that. They're just not exposed. And you know, we deal with it as even educators, even in higher institutions, because the music programs have the smallest budgets, and especially jazz. I better shut up at that point.
Yeah. And it's another proven fact that when a kid picks up a musical instrument, his IQ is raised 8 to 10 points. Yeah, that's proven.
Well, the one thing, if they
Don't look on Wikipedia, please.
No,
Thank you.
If they just start taking lessons even for the first 4 years, they're learning crucial self-discipline.
Very crucial. You're exactly right, John.
Sorry, somebody else
Exactly.
had a question, I didn't know.
And discipline is a life skill, like Jesse's saying. It's a music skill, but it's also a life skill that a lot of kids in New Orleans and other places need, yeah.
Well, this is why a lot of musicians are not real musicians, are not real like social people, because we've been in the practice room.
Exactly.
You know, we've been in the practice room. I mean, yes, I mean, you play their dances and stuff like, we never knew how to dance, because there was always the one in the band. You know?
And New Orleans specifically, you know, has had a tradition of many musicians that could have been doing something else. And if you talk to them, a lot of these cats, you know, they're 20, 30 years old now, be like, hey man, if I hadn't had so-and-so Hamp over at St. Aug,
Yeah.
I'd be robbing houses.
There you go.
I'd be stealing cars. I don't know what I would be doing, but Hamp had my back,
Yeah.
kicked me in my ass, made sure, literally and figuratively, if I had to get popped that day because I was being a ridiculous idiot, that's what needed to happen, so I understand there's consequence. And then, you know, that led to discipline, and discipline led to gigs, and gigs leads to money, and money leads you not to steal from someone. Poor people steal because they don't have nothing. Rich people steal because they're greedy.
I think we better have one last question, because I don't want to keep both the Gilder Lerman crowd and everyone up here from their business.
Does Bobby Jindal know Renee Luau?
No, he's too young. He's too young, but he read about him, obviously.
We know they're tight. May I ask if there's any possibility of hearing some music from the two musicians with instruments here? I know it's not planned, but I'll just put it out there.
What you want to play? All right.
Sure.
Old man. Mark taught me that too. Shake that thing.
Oh, shake that thing.
Oh, yeah.
What key?
I guess B flat. 1, 2.
listen to top 40 blues, R&B, funk, they have to have this. There was the most solid groove there, but there was no groove.
There
They
you
were
go.
hearing it. They were hearing it without playing.
And feeling it.
Yeah, feeling it. That's crucial. Absolutely crucial. Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Dr. John Joyce. We worked many, many gigs together.
I was called the talkative timpanist.
Well, there you go.
No, he keeps improving.
At one time, he tried to get me into the sympathy orchestra. So, he's a big joker, this guy. You're gonna watch him.
Look who's talking.
You're gonna watch him.